evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Frankly Speaking Sports Interviews. Tonight, we are going to play for you an interview we did yesterday morning on the Frankly Speaking Sports Podcast with Glenn Naughton, who is the host of Jet Nation Radio and is also the editor of Jet Nation. Enjoy the show. To now introduce to you on the Frankly Speaking Sports Hotline, the editor of Jet Nation and host of Jet Nation Radio. Please welcome Glenn Naughton. Glenn, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great today. How are you?
I am doing terrific. Glenn, you've been covering the New York Jets for a while. I know you've been a huge New York Jets fan. I grew up in Long Island. I grew up a Jets fan. I'm actually looking at my wall right now, and I got autographed pictures in front of me of Richard Todd, Jerome Barkham, Wesley Walker, just to name a few. But for Jet fans this year, Christmas came a little bit early. I think the best thing that's happened to the Jets in the last 20 years was the removal of Tom Brady from your division, wasn't it?
Oh, I mean, listen, when you have to put up with Brady and Belichick every year, you just kind of look forward to the day where that tandem gets broken up. And while it's nice to have Brady gone, I'm not 100% sold that Belichick won't have something up his sleeve. I know that a lot of fans like to point to Belichick's many failures before Brady came along. But really, if you look at his numbers without Tom Brady and the times that he's been injured or suspended for whatever, this gate, that gate, the other gate, if you look at all the suspensions and the injuries, Belichick has a winning record with Jacoby Brissett and Hoyer and when he had a very, very young Jimmy Garoppolo. So even when Brady's been out, Belichick's winning percentage is still best in the division.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like you said, all his backup quarterbacks have seemed to be successful no matter where they go. Has it surprised you, that Belichick hasn't gotten a veteran quarterback there to compete in that division?
Well, you bring in Hoyer, who's a clipboard guy, he's a spot starter, but I think everybody knew that Belichick wanted the opportunity to prove himself as a guy who could win without Brady. That was the talk a couple of years ago. That's why he wanted to, hang on to Garoppolo. But this is even more extreme than I expected. I thought he would go out and get himself a quarterback, and in sticking with Stidham and Hoyer, you kind of have to wonder if he's just saying, if he just wants to show the world that he can be a great coach with a couple of guys that really nobody expects anything from. Stidham, but we can easily say no one expected anything from Brady as well out of college. But at the same time, it does surprise me. There, like when people said he'll bring in a Winston or a sort of a veteran with who's prone to turnovers, I didn't buy that. I thought we might see somebody come in, just as someone who's a bit more proven. But I am surprised he didn't bring an extra body in. And my hope is just that he doesn't plan on tanking this season and going out and grabbing Trevor Lawrence with the first pick next year.
Well, that gets to my point. That division, and like you said, you can never, I don't care who you are, you can't ever count the New England Patriots out as long as Bill Belichick's there. But it's kind of opened up for once the AFC East.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, listen, even with Belichick being as great as he is, as much respect as you have for him, it's not as if, even if he can still field a competitive team and win some games, it's not going to be the same as it was with Brady, obviously. So the division is absolutely up for grabs, but I think at this point, unfortunately for the Jets, on paper anyway, I think 1 through 53, I don't want to put too much stock in the young kids because we don't know enough about them. Just in terms of proven talent, I think the Bills are probably if anyone's going to steal a division, it's them. But with that being said, I think the biggest factor for the Jets, obviously, the obvious is Darnold progressing. But I think if their corners hold up, if you look at the rest of that defense, and if you look at the improvements on the O-line, the Jets, they can surprise some people. But if gun to my head today, I'd say Buffalo. If anyone else is going to steal the East, it would be them.
Yeah, and their offense, the Jets, has improved a lot over, this offseason. I mean, they added Mims, a wide receiver. They also just acquired Joe Flacco, which you were talking about, no veteran presence except maybe Hoyer in New England. Did it surprise you that the Jets went after a quarterback like Joe Flacco?
It's only the timing surprised me. Because they need, I've been saying for a while now, I'd like the idea, once McCown left, I'd still like to have that veteran mentor in the room with Sam Darnold. I would have thought they may have snapped somebody up earlier in the offseason, but when you look at Flacco's familiarity with Joe Douglas, of course they were together in Baltimore for a while, and the fact that he's got to be at a point in his career where he realizes he's going to be a backup. And after they signed him, I went back and I watched a couple of his games from last year. I watched Green Bay, Denver, and I watched Jacksonville, Denver. And Flacco had more in the tank than I expected. He still made still had plenty of zip on the football. And there was some games where, I picked the Green Bay game on purpose because his numbers weren't very impressive, didn't throw any touchdowns. But, the box score doesn't always tell the whole story. And he put his receivers in position to make some plays a few times. He had what would have been a touchdown pass if his receiver got his feet down. So I'm watching and thinking, as a second quarterback who's been to a Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl and can teach Sam Darnold, you probably couldn't do a lot better than Flacco. And, after what they got out of Luke Falk last year, how could you not be in favor of bringing in a veteran who can at least just have the poise to keep things together if they need him for a few games?
Yeah, and Joe Flacco, terrific quarterback, did great in Baltimore. Do you think the acquisition of Flacco puts more pressure on Donald to succeed?
I really don't think so. You look at the money is small. It's a one-year deal. Flacco's not stealing anyone's job, and Darnold knows that. And I think, the understanding is that he's going to come in and he'll be a mentor. He'll be the guy, like I said, who can prevent a, catastrophe. As much as I like Darnold, he has missed time each of his first two seasons. So there is a little bit of concern about durability, where even though last year, you have to consider it was kind of a fluke thing. It wasn't really an injury. But he has missed time, so you want someone to come in and kind of be able to command the huddle and execute the offense efficiently at the very least. And, they couldn't get a first down last year when Sam Darnold went out. So Flacco, he helps a ton there. I don't think it puts any pressure on Darnold. I think that, everyone knows what their role is. Had they gone out and gotten a guy like Cam Newton, I think that would have been, and I think that's why the Jets didn't. As much as they needed a quarterback, Cam Newton is still a starter in this league as far as I'm concerned. You don't bring in a starter near the end of the line to have your young kid looking over his shoulder. So I think the move makes sense on a lot of levels.
Now, this is Donald, I believe, third year in the league. What kind of leash? Because now you do, like you said, have that quarterback. Not necessarily to put pressure on him because, like you said, he's only there for 1 year. But how much of a leash are the Jets going to have with Sam Darnold before they say, okay, we need to try something else?
I honestly, I think it would have to be a meltdown of epic proportions. I don't really see any scenario where if Sam Darnold is healthy that he's not starting because, let's be realistic. This team isn't winning a Super Bowl. So even if Darnold has some rough patches, you ride through them. And really, that would be a concern. That might be a bigger concern. Let's say Darnold plays poorly this year and they stick with him. Then you have to start wondering, is he the guy, period, and not really worrying about Joe Flacco in this year. You need to say, do we have to start looking at the quarterback again? I don't think they do. I think that what we've seen from Darnold, I think he's highly underappreciated. Everyone talks about the pressure he's dealt with in terms of the offensive line and the poor pass protection. And people have told me, it's part of the game. Everyone has to deal with pressure. As a quarterback, you're gonna face pressure. Right, that's true. But only one guy gets to face the most pressure, and that was Darnold last year. Statistically, I think he was pressured on 42% of his dropbacks, which is just ridiculous. And if you look at his numbers, when the protection is even adequate, he's far and above, what the big picture, or I should say what the box scores look like. Throw the box scores out, show me what the guy does, not with elite protection, but just give him some middle of the road pass protection, and he's a damn good quarterback, and he's still one of the youngest guys in the division. He's 22 years old, and he's younger than the guy who just went number 1 overall in the draft. So Darnold, to me, is still a kid, but he's got more NFL experience than most guys would at his age, and what he's had to deal with. But that's one of the positives in my mind that he's had to deal with is he's had to deal with so much chaos in the pocket for the first 2 years, that if the guys they've added this year live up to their potential, then things are going to calm down a whole lot. And I think he's going to see the game from a much different perspective this year if everybody pans out up front.
We are talking to Glenn Naughton, editor of JetsNation.com and host of Jets Nation Radio. Glenn, you're talking about Sam Darnold. Well, you got to give Joe Douglas some credit. When I first heard of Joe Douglas, all I heard in New York, out of New York, was negative things about this guy. I didn't know him that well. But I've got to tell you, after watching him in the draft, you hit on some things that they needed. They got Becton, a beast on the offensive line now. They picked up a wide receiver. Plus, I watched a lot of Rashad Perryman last year as well. So now you got him and Mims. I mean, you got to give the guy credit for getting the weapons and the tools for Darnold during the offseason to help him succeed.
Yeah, I like the job Joe Douglas has done. While he did go out, like you said, he got him Perryman, he got him Mims. One criticism I would have, and I've heard a lot of other people say it as well, and listen, there's no locks with any of these picks. We don't know who's going to be great, who's going to be terrible. But just from what I saw before the draft, I really felt like the Jets were in a position, and especially once they made a trade and added some picks, which is what I was really hoping for, I really felt like you've got to take advantage of the fact that this is viewed as arguably the deepest receiver class in history, and you've got to grab two. If you add more picks, grab a third. Because to me, Mims, I love what Mims brings, but there's always that concern about coming from a school like Baylor to the NFL, that adjustment. And Perryman, while he was phenomenal down the stretch last year, he's far from established. So you let Robbie Anderson walk, which I kind of get why. I was a Robbie fan. I personally, for what he ended up getting, I would have paid him. Especially since it was like I wouldn't have given Robbie a 3, 4, 5 year deal, but 2 years, small money, I think that would have been worth it. You're bringing in Perryman, whose production has been less than what Robbie's has been, and you're bringing in Mims, who like I said, I think long-term he'll be a good player, but I would have liked to have seen one, if not two more receivers taken in this class, especially in the 6th, 7th round, where there were still guys on the board that were really highly thought of. But, I mean, grand scheme of things, Joe Douglas, I love what he's done. I argued back and forth with people who told me that the Jets were going to go receiver in round 1, and I just said, look, supply and demand, folks. There's only so many left tackles in this draft, and there are 1,000 receivers. Joe Douglas is absolutely, he's going to prioritize Sam's health. He's going to get a tackle with the first pick. I love that he did that. I love Mims. Like I said, I think he's going to be an explosive playmaker. I think the biggest key, really, that not enough people are talking about is going to be the help of Chris Herndon. Because Chris Herndon's a guy who, if you remember the tail end of his rookie season, he looked like he was going to be one of the top tight ends in the league. And you add him to that offense, and all of a sudden it takes a little bit of pressure off the guys on the outside. And, of course, we were all surprised by how well Griffin played last year. So if you have those two guys in the middle, it takes a little bit of pressure off of Mims, off of Perriman, and gives Donald some more options. But I do like what Douglas has done on the great, the big picture.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Glenn, because no reason to get all these receivers if, like you said, you're not going to give your quarterback time to throw the ball. You're just defeating the purpose. And I think he did a real good job doing that. Now, I will tell you something before I go on to the next question with you is I got to watch Perryman last year. I wasn't living in Arkansas then. I was living in Tampa, and I had season tickets. Don't underrate this guy. And the reason I say that is he was the third receiver on a team that by far has the best duo in Evans and Godwin in the league, and he still had, yes, down the stretch, you're right, when those guys got hurt, I mean, he actually still had 700 yards receiving and had 6 touchdowns. So this is a guy that if he can put that type of year together in New York, oh my goodness, the potential over there offensively is just going to be incredible. So don't. Yeah,
Perriman, he's not a guy that I'm like. I like his upside. Any fan likes a guy who's running these sub 4.3 40s and shows they can get open. My only, I'm not even concerned. I think the biggest surprise was that, to me, Robbie Anderson had the more established career. Like, Robbie Anderson, to me, is a guy who never had a 1,000-yard season because, for whatever reason, every single year his quarterback would miss 4 games and play like absolute trash, and Robbie Anderson would be You look back to the year Bryce Petty came in, Robbie was well on pace for 1,000 yards that year, and then all of a sudden Petty couldn't hit the side of a barn, and Robbie Anderson was out of the picture. So he's been the more productive player. That being said, when I watched Perryman on the whole over that, late in the season last year, he did a lot of things that Robbie Anderson doesn't really do. I think he showed better hands than Robbie does, probably a more refined route runner. So I don't dislike Perryman. It's just that it surprised me because the production hasn't been there as consistently as it has with Robbie. So it's a bit more of a roll of the dice, but a high upside move.
We're talking to Glenn Naughton, editor of JetsNation.com and host of Jets Nation Radio. Before I get to a couple of rumors that are going around at the Jets camp, let's talk about the defense a little bit. This defense, I think it's one of the youngest in the NFL. They did get Ashton Davis and a guy that I know very well, Jabari Zuniga, they got him from Florida, obviously, in the draft. Talk about this defense this year. Are they going to, with this young squad, do you think they can handle that AFC East?
Well, as we all know, the Jets have been missing an edge rusher for eons since John Abraham left. They're hoping Zuniga can at least be a situational guy and get to the quarterback. But I think Davis, the thing I like about him, at first I was kind of scratching my head at the thought of a safety, just because there are so many other needs. I would have preferred a receiver in that spot, for example. But really, when you look at as creative as Greg Williams likes to get on defense, and I actually wrote an article about this earlier today, just kind of thinking out loud and saying, could this be a situation where if Davis comes in and plays well, you can then let Jamal Adams spend a little bit. I know Jamal Adams spends a lot of time in the box as it is. I give Jamal Adams a bit more credit than some people do when it comes to playing in coverage. But the truth of the matter is, he makes his biggest plays, his splash plays come when he's up front. So if Davis is a quick transition to the pro game, and I'm sure we all know Pro Football Focus had him graded as a first-round pick. They thought that highly of him. Others viewed him as sort of a second-rounder. So by and large, he's viewed as a steal for the Jets. The amount of ground he can cover is absolutely intriguing, and if he can step in with as often as we like to see, or as often as we see Greg Williams, who likes to go with a lot of three safety looks, could he put Davis in a position where he can cover more ground to cover the back end and leave Jamal Adams up front a little bit more and try to make plays in the box? I think that could be a win-win. And of course, we're getting Mosley and Williamson back, assuming they keep Williamson. I think a few of us, myself, were surprised he's still around, not because he's not a good player. I think he's a damn good player. But when they went out and signed Anwusar from Baltimore, I looked at the fact that he previously played alongside C.J. Mosley, so was that sort of the beginning of the end for Williamson? But listen, they were playing with their fourth, fifth, sixth linebackers last year. If you go from street linebackers to Avery Williamson and C.J. Mosley in the middle, with having Jamal Adams be disruptive up front, and Foley Fatukasi, what a revelation he was last year. And then, of course, Quinnen Williams. A lot of fans are down on him because, everybody wants Aaron Donald right out of the gate. But, I encourage people, go back and watch Week 14 last year against Miami. Go back and watch him against Cincinnati. He took strides as the season went on, and I think if he gets stronger this offseason, Quinnen Williams is going to be a force up front with the guys I already mentioned. And Nathan the D-line was great this year. Nathan Shepard, a guy who even I gave up on. I thought he was gone once that Pete suspension ended. He had himself a really nice season. Kyle Phillips, the undrafted guy out of Tennessee, had a really nice season. So a lot of good players up front. You got a Pro Bowler in Mosley returning, and Williamson alongside him, who may not be that Pro Bowl, All-Pro level, but he's not far off from that. And Ashton Davis, and like I said at the top, I think the biggest thing is the corners. If the corners hold up, I feel like the Jets defense is stellar everywhere else on the unit.
Now, let me ask you this, Glenn. Jamal Adams, you mentioned, who I love Jamal Adams. I'll tell you that right now. He says he wants a long-term contract, but obviously if the Jets do not offer him that, he wants to go somewhere else. What's the latest news you're hearing on Jamal Adams?
It's what you're saying. He wants the money now. The Jets want to wait it out. We've seen Gary Myers, former reporter for the Daily News, report that he's claiming that the Jets are asking for a 1 and a 3 from Dallas. And then it's basically, from what we're hearing out there, the way these rumors tend to go, it has a feeling, a really strong feeling of this being Jamal's agents trying to negotiate through the media and putting it out there that The Jets have a package that they've set a price, that a trade is likely if demands aren't met. So they're trying to force the Jets' hand a little bit. But I think Joe Douglas feels like the Jets have all the leverage. They've got the year 5 option after this season. Then, of course, they can franchise. So the Jets are in a good spot. It all comes down to, is Jamal Adams willing to hold out? We know the new collective bargaining agreement made it more prohibitive for players to sit out. But if that's his only way to try to force the Jets' hand, even with $40,000 a day fine, Jamal Adams is probably trying to go from a $9 million salary to about $17 million. So that's $40,000 a day for a month or two would be worth it in the long run for him if the Jets eventually cave and give in to his demands. So I think that we know he wants his money. It was reported by Rich Samini and many others at the end of the season that Jamal wanted a new deal this offseason. And it's not unprecedented. McCaffrey just got one. They were drafted the same year. But it is extremely rare for teams to give out that kind of money. To me, Jamal he's a difference maker on defense. I would love for him to be a Jet for life. But I think that the interesting dynamic to me is Jamal's sort of the way he handled the trade rumors last year. I didn't like that at all. As we know, it was the Jets basically picked up the phone and listened, and that's a general manager's job. If a GM isn't taking calls on any player, then he should be fired. That's he's there to build the team. So for Jamal to blow that up to the deal, they shopped me, and I don't trust them anymore, and I only trust Christopher Johnson. Like, it was really, really, I guess, immature, for lack of a better term. And I wonder how that sort of, how Adam Gase feels about that. Because Adam Gase has gotten rid of, you remember when he was in Miami, he got rid of some of his best players. And as an offensive guy, he got rid of Jay Ajayi. Granted, Ajayi was struggling, but still, he was one of his best players. He traded some of his best players just because he didn't like their attitudes, or he would bench guys because he didn't like their attitudes. That's something the Jets haven't had in a long time. A head coach with who would respond to that type of or in that manner to someone who did something that the coach didn't like. So I can't help but wonder if Adam Gase is sort of nudging Joe Douglas and saying, look, if we got to move this guy for a couple of firsts, I don't mind. That being said, I would love for him to be a Jet. We as Jets fans, we see too many. It's not very often they draft an impact player, and they usually end up getting traded when that happens, whereas other teams find ways to keep their guys.
Right. Now, before I let you go, I have to ask you this question. For the last 20 years, you've been hearing the best quarterback in the AFC East is Tom Brady. Is it almost to the point where we can arguably say, if you think about all the quarterbacks right now, that Sam Darnold, by the end of this year, could be that name in the AFC East?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I would say that now, really. Like I said, based on the way he played last year when he had decent protection, like I said, Josh Allen up in Buffalo, they made the playoffs, but that's a guy, who, again, 1 through 53, he's got more talent around him. If you put those two guys in on the same roster, I'm taking Sam Darnold every time. Tua, of course, in Miami is, being the first round guy, ridiculously accurate. But I think you're going to have some concerns about his hip. A guy that young who has an injury that serious, how's he going to react to, how's he going to respond when a few 300-pounders fall on top of him? So I think there's some injury concerns there, but I think he can be a great one. But right now, and I don't think it's close. If you were to say Darnold, Stidham, Allen, or Tua, I would take Darnold in a heartbeat.
Now, the New York Jets had before I have to ask you this, and then I'm going to let you go. New York Jets had the third toughest schedule supposedly in the league. And, you can take that with a grain of salt. You know how that goes. But just based on last year, what's your prediction if I said to you today, how many wins will the Jets end up with next year? What would you say?
I would say this is a 6-win team. The talent's been added. They've gotten a lot better. But the schedule is a lot tougher, as you said. And yes, anything can happen. If somebody's quarterback goes down, all of a sudden a game that looks like an absolute loss becomes a win. But that being said, if this year plays well, if Austin plays well, if they get good production out of the corners, I could see them being a 9 or 10 win team. But assuming the corners are pedestrian, I think they'll lose some close ones, and we'll be looking at about a 6-10 season.
All right. Well, Glenn, I definitely want to thank you. It's been a pleasure having you on Frankly Speaking Sports. Hopefully, when the season gets underway, love to have you on some weeks after games where we can break down maybe the game, the previous Sunday's games, and talks about what went good and what went bad.
All right, sounds good, man.
All right, stay safe, okay?
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. That was Glenn Naughton, the editor of JetsNation.com and the host of Jet Nation Radio. A reminder, if you loved that interview and you want to see some of our past interviews that we have done and all the current and future interviews we do on Frankly Speaking Sports Interviews, you can go to our YouTube channel, Frankly Speaking Sports. Go ahead and subscribe. It's free and it has all of our videos. Hope you enjoyed the show. Everybody have a terrific night.